All right, my friends, here we are. Welcome to the show. This is my favorite part of the week. We're going to look at several people who have made it past the gates. And it's really improved in the last month, I'm going to say here, where we just have a variety of people doing the work of putting it in getting their annotations in and putting it in the database because I've shamed them. I think that's the main reason this has happened. But it has gotten better. And a couple trends I just want to say right off. When you look at the overall spectrum of the dojo, let's say there's an average rating of, 1,300 or something like that. Actually, we'll get a visual representation of that in a little bit. But by far more graduations are happening at the left end, the lower end of the spectrum, and that just makes a lot of sense. The more competitive it is, as you go up the ranks, the harder it's going to be, the more work you're going to have to do in order to progress. And I guess that's an intuitive thing that we all knew before, but it's just kind of interesting and nice to have it confirmed by the Dojo training program. Dojo training program is working hard. Oh man, behind the scenes, we're talking all kinds of stuff about making Dojo 2.0. We're getting a lot of help from other people. Today we're going to feature a game by Jack Stenglein. That dude has been crushing it with the Dojo scheduler, amongst other things, helping us out. So in addition to thinking about like what makes a good program, the other thing that's happening with the Dojo is just tech stuff, right? Which you don't want me anywhere near the tech stuff, Nothing at all. Okay, so here we go. This is Pepper Chess. And Pepper Chess is, I think, probably going to be in the chat as well. And so this is, first of all, really interesting. 5th over the board rated game. ECF, that's English Chess Federation. And you know what? I have to be a little careful. I'm worried we already did this one. Pepper Chess, did we cover this game already? It doesn't feel like we did. The story, though, I didn't recognize the position, but the story sounds similar, like someone higher rated and then also being late at night. So here we go. Double feature. Wait, Pepper Chess, so is that true? Is that true that we already did this one, man? Because I'll get a different game. Okay, Pepper Chess. I thought it was funny because I looked at this position. I was like, no, we haven't seen this one before. But then the story itself, I was like, yeah, we've looked at this. So that's fine. I'll get us another game here. And Pepper Chess is graduating, my friends. Is graduating and working hard. And I looked up Pepper Chess. And one thing, while I'm pulling this up, that I'll say that is interesting to me is that Pepper Chess is doing a lot of work. And so it gives me a lot of appreciation for this particular graduation ceremony. Some people will advance quicker than others. For example, in other areas of my life, I've struggled with other kinds of, tasks, and I know that just to move the needle a little bit, whether it's some physical fitness routine or whatever kind of routine it is, it takes a lot of work. And so it doesn't matter to me as a fan whether you go 800 to 900 or 25 to 26. If it's a hard struggle, then I really appreciate it. Okay, so let me pull up this other game here. I had a feeling. This is a nice game, actually. This was the other one I was thinking of bringing up because Yogi Bear is in the program. Okay, here we go. And what I like about this is that Pepper Chess isn't following any kind of theory. It's just making moves. Now, D4 is definitely the best move, and something that we're going to say about ED5, while not a terrible move, is that it's going to release the bishop on C8. So that's an important feature of the position. And now with queen e2, queen e2 is a mistake because we're blocking the bishop, right? And now queen e7 is a blunder. Okay. Did I already do today's ranktele? I don't know what that means. I don't know what a ranktele is. So, let's talk about this. Very important. Queen e2 is a mistake because you're getting in the way of stuff. And if black just plays bishop e7, now we're going to say black has a substantial development lead because this is in a lot of ways a negative tempo. So what that means is it's going to have to move again, or you're going to have to move the pawn now to get the bishop out. Whereas before, in this position, the bishop can get out. So here, d4, white can claim like, you're just still holding time, holding tempo. Okay, so black makes a big mistake, and now white misses knight d5 with really a beautiful position now because not only have you won a pawn, but when they take, you get to develop a piece of your choice, right? Your choice, but bishop makes more sense to me. And of course, the knight is creating a nasty little threat. So let me stress, at this level pepper chess, right, the main thing that is going to push you to the next level, to over 1,000, is hanging stuff. And the same thing goes, of course, for Yogi Bear. And then while we're on this journey, we want to be cognizant of time developing. But that time is not what's going to keep you from getting to 1,000. Okay, that is just something that's nice to inculcate because it's nice if you hear in the back of your head that I'm going to yell at you for queen e2, right? Whereas if you just listen to the show, that I'm going to be fine with any of these moves, right? As long as they develop. Okay, so mistake, and definitely knight d5. By the way, I'm going to take this off, this bishop e2. I'm going to delete this move. I might use this as a model game. And now, why is bishop e7 a mistake? Because knight takes e7 would have held the pawn on d5. Right? Okay, good. So we're seeing some basic tactical mistakes. And then this is the end of the game. This is definitely a blunder. So pop. And I like knight f3. Wait, let's read this. I am not in a rush to take the rook on a8 here as it is trapped. I want to develop my kingside to castle. Black needs to develop here. Now, since you're going to take this particular rook anyway, I don't think it matters too much. But I appreciate the thought. Bishop f5. Black needs to be ultra sensitive to being able to win the knight before it comes back out. So let's talk about this a second and say that in this position, this is the correct move because it will hold the knight from coming back. And these are the kinds of annotations that I really want to see for the under 1,000 level, is to find the moves that hold the most material, right? So king f8, also a question mark. Pepper chess won by resignation. Dude. Dude, Pepper chess, they're making it easy. They're just rolling over. They're just rolling over here, Pepper chess. What's going on? All right. Let's stress here that in this position, let's say black considered bishop d6, pop, b6, followed by bishop b7. This is technically winning at the GM level. However, this would have given Pepper a little bit, Pepper has to work now a little bit. It has to work a little bit to win the game. Okay, great. Now, so we'd done the previous Pepper chess Well, I'm sure we're going to look more at Pepper Chess's annotations. And let's go actually look real quick here at the scoreboard, because I want to show you guys. Pepper Chess is going for it. And what you can see there with the fifth over the board game, that Pepper Chess is really, has begun probably as a pandemic player here. So what I want you to see is 3 points per box. And what that means is we're grinding. The rate of change is a good indication of the level of grind, which is why I prefaced this by saying I really appreciate Pepper Chess's struggle here. So let's take a look. We got some games. We've got all these mate and ones. We've got the puzzle rush stuff. Everything is basically getting done here for Pepper Chess. And definitely some improvement. And now let's go look at the next level, and we can see what Pepper Chess is going to need. We've got already some games. This I think is transferred from the last one. I will have to ask Pepper Chess about that, because Pepper Chess was just graduated. Now, by the way, when you go up, you don't get to keep your old games. This reboots from 0. Okay, that's an important point. Where you can keep your previous work is if you had done all the mate and ones, that's fine. And if you had already done some of the mate and twos, then you could keep those. And then you're just getting more, obviously, with the mate and twos. And you can also keep whatever you've done for the first chess workbook, or if you've already made it with a puzzle rush, for example, right? So we'll reboot just this part. Everything else that's cumulative, you can keep. Or rather, just another way of saying it is that the game annotations are not cumulative. You have to do those again when you go to the next level. So this will be interesting watching Pepper Chess move forward. I appreciate the work, and I appreciate now we're going to get some mate and twos, couple, which will hopefully help Pepper Chess. One thing we're going to institute with the reboot is in the under 1,000 cohorts, we're going to introduce more quick games simply played with the notion of not dropping stuff. And that's the main thing that Pepper Chess and the under 1,000 cohort is struggling with. How we frame that struggle is going to be kind of key in the next couple months. But the basic idea is previously, when we started the dojo, we did not want people to play fast games, but we are going to allow it just to get high volume of not hanging stuff in the under 1,000 sections. Okay, let's go to the next one. Next, we have Dural Max, and now Dural Max has been doing a lot of work. Why don't we just start here, actually? We'll start here on this. When I say here, I mean the scoreboard. And just to show you, because Dural Max doesn't have any games. And I want to show you their work here. And what I need to do, I need to hide this first. Because that's been, hide sheet, there we go. By the way, actually, this one popped up. This is a great thing. I just want to stress a fact of the dojo that we can talk about. And you can see, if you imagine the number of participants per cohort, it'd be somewhere around here is our median, right? And let's say 13. Let's say 1350 is the median of the dojo, somewhere around there. But if you think about how many people have graduated, it's by far more have done it over here, right? So people like Pepper, who are going to be new to the game, especially experiencing the first improvement that you're going to get when you do longer games over the board, they are going to be moving faster. And then you just see it dips off. That dips off, but the number of graduates is going to dip off. Okay, so here we go. Let's go find Dural Max. There Dural Max is, and it says they've done one game in the analyzed. I couldn't find it. A lot of times, by the way, if I don't find it, you can tell me, where it is, or maybe you didn't submit it to the database, fine, and I'll cover it on a different game review show. I love the fact that Dural Max is crushing with the tactics over here, the mate in twos, and the couple classic games, a lot of other boxes, right? So Dural Max is going to go up into the next group, and yeah, I think when we look then at points per box, 7, that's somebody who's cruising and hasn't hit anything close to a plateau yet. Okay, so let me go. I have to always look at the chat. Sometimes I neglect it and people get really mad. And I blew it. They get mad because I got too many things. Boomer GM's got too many things. And and people are telling me, you know what we used to have? We used to have a thing where DM Hokey enabled people to yell at me. And I got too annoying because people were saying annoying things. They paid 10 cents to yell at me in a situation like that. Anyways, let me just tell you all that Dural Max is doing the work, mostly tactics. And that's, so you didn't miss too much. You didn't miss too much. It was my bad, of course. I don't know why it didn't switch when I told it to switch. Okay? All right, let's go past peak. Past peak over here. Now, past peak, this is a little bit what happens if I can't find their game, but somebody else covered their game, then I'm going to look at that. And so this is Griff against Past Peak, Dojo Liga tournament. And here, Griff, his opponent, is going to use my easy system against the French, which hopefully will come out soon as a chessable course. Now, bishop d3 is an inaccuracy. We want to see knight f3 first. How bad is it to play bishop d3? Maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's not so bad. All right. Bishop d7, knight f3, and a4 I don't like. Why? Because I'd be yelling at you for lack of development. So notice that what a4 considers by white is that white's saying, I care so much about preventing bishop b5 that I would rather not develop than allow bishop b5. So this position is in the file, if you will, and there's a dirty trick here where we can go pop, pop, and now b4 and bishop f2 will get the bishop trapped. There's no way out after king e2, poor dude. And so it ends up being kind of a rough business for black. And if I remember correctly, cd was a slightly better attempt, but then knight d4 will prevent the bishop from going to b5 anyway. Okay, so knight f3, bishop b5, castle. Okay. Now, let me just say that black gave you essentially 2 tempi to trade off the bishop. So we shouldn't come away with this thinking that black is a genius and we're in trouble. A lot of times people fetishize the bishop on c8, both the black player trying to get rid of it and the white player not wanting to trade it off. Yes, it's a positional gain for black. However, black is paying time here. He's paying time. C takes is a mistake because now the knight, which is our worst minor, is going to get this square. And we should definitely take with the pawn. What should black do? Knight c6. Right? Knight c6, and then we're just going to play knight c6, and then we're just going to see what does white do, right? Okay. Knight c6, and then queen b5 is definitely a mistake. Okay. Now, let me stress another thing about this positional aspect of these French positions. White got time in return for the bishop. If white doesn't do anything with the time, anything somehow creative, then black will in fact be better. And it's a little bit what's happening here, right? And this, what's the main reason I'm going to scream at you for this? You should know. Well, it's time. It's time, my friend. We are giving away time with queen b5. Okay, so past peak, we're hoping the dude took on b5 and played king d7. That's at least the easy way to play. Let's see what black did. Pop, pop, pop. Okay. Now, why do I like king d7 a little bit better? Now, castles isn't bad. Castles isn't bad. I like the king in the middle. Except I'm fully okay with castles. All right, we have to spend a tempo with rook e1. Yeah, I like king d7 much better because our rook is probably going to be more active on in the c file. This knight is probably going to have to go back, and when we take, we want some juice over here. Right? Okay, but castles is good in terms of development. So, rook e1, a6. Now, given that the knight is actually kind of misplaced there, I'm not sure we need to play a6. And one thing I want to stress is this is a common psychological thing that happens where people feel annoyed by that knight as if the knight is doing something to your soul. That knight's not doing all that much, Bows. That knight's not doing all that much. So we don't need to be in a hurry to trade the thing off. Knight h6 is a little bit weird because you'd say, what about the double pawns? Well, we don't care about double pawns. So knight h6 comes to mind. But knight 6, all right, here we go. Okay, very logical. Probably h6 now. Yeah, good move. Five, five, five. Okay. It all depends how we feel about the move king, bishop b6, but knight f5 is definitely a question. And here you're right. Knight f5 would have been better since it attacks the bishop and also threatens to lodge itself on h4 if the g-pawn moves. Okay, fair enough. These are good notes. These are good notes. Okay. b4. Again, this is not past peaks notes. Past peak did not have any games in the database that I could find. So that is why we're looking at it like this. Now, b4. Let's read what white says here. The dark knight compels the pawns in front of the white king to stay put. The move is played to start working on c5 as an outpost, and I am considering how to get my knight to b3 after playing bishop c5. Okay, b4, let's say it is a highfalutin move. And why isn't Kraai going to like it? Krai's not going to like it because it's not a developing move. Okay? So, what move is better? Either f4 or knight d2. Those are our moves. We can think about b4 later. And now, let's just say that even the exchange sacrifice is very interesting here for black. But if that doesn't work with knight e5, then king b7 is a nice simple building move anyway, because the king wants to be on a square like king b7, and then white will definitely owe us a tempo for figuring out how to deal with the e-pawn. Okay, so don't like b4. Again, if you hear my voice yelling at you when you don't develop your stuff, it will help you. Number of people in the dojo are saying it. They're like, oh yeah, Krai's yelling at me for all this stuff. Yeah, okay. So, by the way, an interesting position to think about exchange sacks. So, for example, on knight d2, I believe in f4, by the way. By the way, one thing about f4 is we're containing the knight. It's not just that we're stopping, we're controlling this pawn. But imagine knight d2. This would be an example of a variation to analyze. Knight e5, bishop b6, knight d3. It's complicated. Rook e1, rook e3, knight b2, bishop takes, king takes, and then rook b1. Now the scary thing at the end of that, for all of that for black is that since our development, this guy isn't out. It doesn't look good with the rook landing on b8. But that's an example of the kind of variations I would like people to look at here. Okay, so one of the reasons I did that is that in addition to king b7, knight e5 is an interesting pawn sack, exchange sack with knight e5, bishop b6, knight c4. Notice now that it's a lot harder to dislodge that knight. Knight c4, bishop takes, king takes. And it's a rich position where I guess I'd rather be black. It's complicated, though. It's very complicated. Okay, so what I want you to see about rook d7 is indirectly attacking the pawn on e5 because bishop b6 is out of the question. But it's not a building move, okay? So what do I mean by that? I just mean like, hey, we got to deal with like a king b7 would be a building move. Okay. Now, let me just say, a lot of times I talk trash about moves like b4, but let's give it a moment here. Because one of the interesting things that I think is floating through White's mind is if king b7, then maybe the intention is bishop d4. Now, I still like black, but it is it becomes interesting then because I can't easily play f6 because of this tension. And then we can see that there is a dream. So black would have to have something active after let's say king b7, bishop d4. And indeed, after rook d7, bishop d4, I think we're going to get a similar thing. Okay, knight e7, poor move. Why? Because it's not developing the stuff. So, for example, the easy way to block the blockade, or at least to think about it and to develop our stuff, would be rook c7, knight d2, c5, right? What's the question? Wasn't he just on e7? Right, I get it. So one of the things, too, that I've talked about for years is this thing of playing with your pretty pieces. So what black sees with knight e7 is that they can create what looks like a threat with knight f5. But the knight on g6, it's like one of the few pieces that's doing something. And what black needs to really feel the urgency of is, hey, these guys gotta get out. And I really think that feeling, that intuitive feeling, is one of the major differences between strong players and weaker players. And you see a variety of ways in which it expresses itself. I did a lot of the videos on how to make 2,000 and 2,100 in the training program about that kind of feeling. And those players, obviously, if you tell them to fix their bad piece before the game, they'd be like, boss, what are you talking about? Of course I know that. Why are you telling me that? But because they don't have an intuitive sense, right, of the need to fix it, they end up making that same kind of mistake over and over again. And I'm doing this interesting book. I'm going to maybe finish the next couple of days, do a review, think like a super GM. Basically a bunch of positions that they had different levels of player look at. I think I'm going to try to incorporate that into the dojo. It's a great book. It shows that in any time there's a position where somebody needs to fix a bad piece, the lower rated players really have a harder time with it. And you see it here. So here we go. Knight e7, knight f5, a3. Poor move. Why? We should be thinking about knight b3. Now, does it ruin anything? Maybe not. Okay. Now, maybe Kraai, be a little nicer. Be a little nicer. Maybe it's fine. Okay, buddy? You don't have to be so mean about it all the time. Just because it doesn't develop. All right. So, big moment here for black. White is about to achieve their dreams with knight b3. And they take. And this was black's intention the whole time with knight e7. So let's let it happen. And now we're going to contemplate just how bad is this position for black. My question here is, can we play a5? It's very loose, but I feel like we gotta crack this blockade of our c6 pawn. There's a lot of questions because once we take here, this a rook is open, so it's not the most pleasant thing, but that's the variation that Griff and Paspique should be looking at in their post-mortem. Good move. And now black is passive. Okay. Rook ec1. I'm going to yell at you a little bit for that. Rook ac1 is a little bit more prudent because the rook on e1 will always have a function of helping stop f6. Black with the bishop needs to break out at some point, whether it's even sacking a pawn or whatever. Dude needs to break out. Okay, so rook ac1 feels a little better to me. King d7, good move. Rook c2, okay. Okay, now, the rook, if we're going to double, would have been better on c3, so that if bishop g5 ever happened, we could play rook c2. But given that knight c5 is maybe too much to deal with anyway, maybe it's not a problem. All right, black is obviously in grief, and I don't like this move. This helps white keep the position closed while he massages the c6 square. So what would have been better is definitely thinking about f6. We gotta try to open things up a little bit. g3 is a nice move. h5, rook c3. Let's read what happens here. And here I have no ideas or conviction on what needs to be done. This is a critical position and the draw seems straightforward enough. It seems like white has the chances, but I had no earthly idea how to proceed. Okay, great. Let's talk about it. The first thing that white should say is, before I even think about whether this is a draw or whatever, let's bring our king in, bows. Let's bring in the king in. Now, we could start with h4 if we were in any earthly way concerned about black breaking with h4. It wouldn't harm anything anyway. But then we're going to put the king here. And the bummer for black is really after any kind of knight a5, black can't move any of the heavies or the king. All right, so rook c3. Nothing wrong with rook c3. Rook f8. Go back, my friend. Okay, knight b3. Now, let's talk about it. This is really interesting because I think what white's psychological drama is here is white can't think of a way to create another clear threat on the position. But that isn't the way to approach it. You should say, bows, this dude, we can talk about other things later, but this dude needs to be fixed. Now, the first thing you do is you put him on here. Now, I think black is just going to need to go back and forth. Maybe they'll figure out f6 as a means of desperation at some point, but it's not really clear at this point if f6 is really going to help. After you put the king here, then we'll first we'll just get there. First you just get there, bows. Then you say to yourself, oh, maybe I'll put the king here. And then if I go here and here, well, the party is really beginning, right? The party's really beginning. Black is really, well, let's say lost, right? So the first thing to do in these positions is fix your pieces. Your king is not fixed. No! I got a draw here, buddy. Oh, no, man. Oh, God. Pepper chess. Pepper Chess, don't get any other books. Trust the program. Trust the program, Pepper Chess. Trust me. Those things are all laid out for you, Baus. We're gonna go talk about it after I read this. After the game, discussed ideas like creating an open file on the king's side, since black's rooks and kings are tied to the defense of the c-pawn. I used this idea replaying the position 8 times the following day and won 4 of the 6 games. I have success with 31 f4 as opposed to h4 and then working to control the open files. Okay. Now, by the way, let me just stress again. You can think about opening stuff on the king side, but put the king in the center first. This dude isn't working, right? And definitely don't draw. You can improve. You can massage. You're clearly better here. Black is passive. Probably objectively lost here just because they can't move. It's a bummer when you can't move. It's really a bummer. Okay. So let's go look at past peak, and then I'm going to look again at the scoreboard with Pepper Chess here, because I want to yell at him and other people that about something about the program, one of the key ideas of the program. Okay, first I'm going to remember to switch the screen. Thank you very much. And we're going to go look at past peak here first. So. Past peak, and sometimes the mHOKI takes a while for it to switch, so it still has him in this past peak in the 900 to 1000, but of course past peak is now in the next cohort. Let's take a look at how this has happened. Where do we put this? Put this over here, and wait, just get rid of it, Baus. So I want you to see that past peak has been grinding. 2 points per box, about a 100-point game. Let's take a look. These games that were submitted, I'm going to guess Past Peak did them, but did not submit them to the database. By the way, let me give an announcement. So later on, as you can see, we're going to look at Hero of the Dojo, Jack Stinglein's game, and his graduation. Jack is doing amazing things. And Charlie Silva likes to say whenever an ambulance goes by, he's like, that's ambulance 1. It's probably already ambulance 2 or 3. Anyways, Jack is a hero of the dojo and created a second way to submit the games. But not only that, but a way to view the games that if you don't have something like ChessBase. And honestly, his viewer is even better. And so what I mean by that is you go to the chess.com scheduler. First of all, that's the place to organize your sparring or your discussion of a book or whatever it might be. You can now search using Jack's function there on the Games tab. You can, let's say, search at all the recent games that were done for your cohort, for example, last month. And one cool thing there, too, is, let's say you've done annotation. Oftentimes, you'll find people who've done the annotation of your same game in there as well. Amazing. So that thing is just crushing. And one of the big problems from the dojo at the beginning was how do we get a functioning way for people to communicate with themselves, to organize times. Like, bro, I'm going to meet you at 3 and we're going to talk about X. And the scheduler definitely is doing that. And Jack is expanding the functionality of the scheduler, and it's really going to help when we do the site reboot this May 1st. Okay, as you can see, Past Peak is doing loads of work here. Mate in twos, thank you very much. Gone beyond the 500 mark here that was required. Look at the work, dude. Look at the work. It's getting done. One of the cool things, too, if you see about the scoreboard, when they're 11, that means it just shows how long they've been in the program at a glance. Of course, it usually also has a starting date, as here with 7/12 of last year, but just visually you can see where somebody is in their, how long they've been at the dojo. Okay, now I get to yell at Pepper Chess. Okay, so Pepper Chess, let's go over here and look at your new cohort. Because Pepper Chess is already getting confused and saying, maybe I'll read Simple Chess, maybe I'll read some other book. Here's the deal. So one of the beautiful things about the dojo that I realized right away and trying to, when we trying to create this thing, is that people were doing a thing where they were looking all over the internet and getting advice from a million different places. So, for example, Simple Chess, that's a great book. It comes later in the program. I recently reviewed it on the YouTube channel. Okay? But when we look here at what Pepper Chess is going on, this is where it's at, my friends. So, Pepper Chess, to progress, what we need from you, Baus, is the Made in Twos. We need more of this first chess workbook. You're done with the puzzle rush, Baus. You're done. The middle game sparring, yes. The end game sparring, yes. The classic games, yes. Right? All this stuff needs to get done, and that should be your first priority. Okay? What happens when you get distracted is then your mind ends up going a million different places. And a story I've told before, but I think it definitely applies here, is I had a running friend who was doing a similar thing, had been running for decades. Finally got himself a running coach, and then was making immediate progress. And, it was weird because, you can find a million different running set of guidelines, training programs online. Doesn't cost anything. But the coach was like, all right, tell me at the end of the week what you've done, and this is what I want you to do for the next week, and give him a structure. And then boom, progress was happening. And so one of the things I want to stress is, sure, Simple Chess is a great book, but there's a reason, first of all, we put it later in the program. And number two, even if it is a great book, and even if you got something from it now, that's not the point. The point is we don't want you distracted by a million different things while you're doing it, because there's so much energy suck that goes into thinking, well, maybe I should do this, maybe I should do that. And you see it especially on Chess Twitter. Oh my God, you can lose your mind in Chess Twitter. They're telling you to do all kinds of million different things, some of which aren't dumb. It's not like they're dumb, but your mind is going to get destroyed by thinking about all these different things that you can do. And I don't think this just applies to chess. This applies to any kind of improvement. Okay. Got a question from Skabix. How should we balance studying and playing? One classical but plus annotations enough playing for 1 week? Absolutely. And at some point even, you're going to want to take a break and do other things. That's one classical game and annotations. That's a lot of work. That is a lot of work. Okay, so I'm going to remember to switch scenes here, and we're going to move on. And then we're going to talk about S.B. McManus. And we're going to flip this. And S.B. McManus is also doing some work, moving a little quicker through the dojo. Let's take a look at their game. Good. I think that's a very worthwhile note. Bishop b3 makes less sense here because the rock on g6. Okay. Right. And c4 I like better than c3. c3 would be kind of a dogmatic, London-y structure. So, knight bd7. One interesting move here is knight c6. And the point of knight c6 is to slow down b4. Now, we're going to see in this game, white didn't understand that they should be playing for b4. But let's just say some basic stuff. These pawns are pointing this way, and the queen side is then going to be white's side of the board. And so knight c6 does two things. It intends e5 and it prevents b4. And if d5 were saying, boss, you're moving your pawns before they should. And that's maybe the real tricky thing about knight c6, because you have to understand, oh, it's not such a bad thing if I get kicked like that, because white is committing their structure. Nothing wrong with knight d7. b6, fine. And now white should definitely play b4, right? Gaining space. White doesn't get it, it's fine. c5, and now a mistake from white. By the way, this move, c5, I'm not 100% on c5, because the question becomes, first of all, what are we going to do? And if d5 at any point works, then d5 will kill the bishop on b7, right? Okay, so I think bishop b2, there's a reason that d5 is controversial, let's say. But bishop b2 would just create the question, what are you going to do about d5? Maybe black will play d5 then. Let's look at what happened. Pop, and now e6 is a very nice move. The point being that e4 is no bueno. At least I don't think it's a bueno because of knight e4. Yeah. So rook d1, and right, these are good notes. de, fe, bishop b2. Whether it's equal or not, that's what white should have done. Right? Rook d1, mistake. Pop, pop. And now we're going to get, the next phase of the game is going to be about the following. How do we take the pawn? And then after we take the pawn, how do we neutralize the compensation that white gets on the d-file? SBM McManus is here. Nice. Cool. Here we got a question. What to do with good books we have and are not in the program? For example, Alekhine's Annotated Games. Later on, we get New York 1924 by Alekhine. That's later. That's later in the program. Okay. Thank you, King's Bishop, for rating. If you're just joining us, this is the Dojo training program. We're talking about model games. That is games, excuse me, we're not talking about model games. We're talking about graduation today, which just means that players have moved from one cohort, which is a rating band, to a higher one. Okay, so here we go. And if you, here, let me put in this. This is always good to do a little advertising cry. If you do Exclam training, you can see what we're on about here. So here we go, rook d1, pop, pop. I think black should steal the pawn. Let's just say, though, that a move like queen e7, not stealing the pawn, would also be a nice position for black. So here we go. Let's start this party. Knight d5, bishop b2, and now knight 7, f6. For my simplistic sense of the game, I want to play pop, 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 and develop. And then if I need to, I can play d5 to hold on to everything. I think black, I'm going to say, is clearly better. Some would say winning, but I'm not that dude. I'm just going to say that it's clearly better for black. Okay? So the problem from black from a tempo perspective is we need to move the knight on d5 anyway. That guy needs to go, and knight takes c3 allows us to do it in one shot. Pop, and now bishop d5 is a very fancy move, which makes me a little nervous, but notice that on knight d5, there's reasons black did this fancy move, but notice that knight d5, the reason white doesn't like it, black doesn't like it, is because the pressure on the d-pawn. So already black's in a slightly funky position. Okay, so, yeah, we're doing some shame here. This is a big moment for white. Can white generate something here? White plays rook d2, and that's certainly logical. Let's just do a quick variation check here. e4. Oh, I have to delete this because I think I am going to make this a model game. I had model game in my mind as a Freudian slip earlier because this is definitely an interesting annotation. I'm going to delete this in a second. Pop, pop, pop. And the good news for black is that everything is hanging. If that's pawn, the rook on c2 weren't hanging, then maybe we could consider e4. But I don't think it works. So let's delete variation. Okay, so rook d2, bishop b7, rook a d1, knight e4. Okay, good. Rook d3, bishop a6. Definitely weird. What am I going to yell at black for? Development. That's the main thing. Yes, it's weird from it. There's tactical problems with bishop a6, yada, yada. But development is key. What do we need to do? We need to move the queen bows. So what would the natural move be? Probably snip, snop, queen e7. Develop your stuff. Defaulting to development will save your soul. People don't believe me when I say that. All right, ChessDojo wants me to go back to bishop f6. Where do you want me to go back to bishop f6? Here? The reason bishop f6 does not, this is why bishop f6 is so tricky, because bishop f6, queen f6, and we are not hanging the bishop because Kavutskiy over here is hanging. I should have mentioned that. Thank you very much. That was why I said bishop d5 was a highfalutin move. And I'm assuming black saw that. Maybe they did. But I'm going to guess both players saw that. Right? Yeah. So, okay. Bishop a6. We just got to develop bows. Rook d5. Now things are making, now maybe white has full compensation. Now again, we want to put the queen here because the queen is going to want to be close to her man. If we have a choice here between protecting with the pawn and the rook, we definitely want the rook. Why? Because the rook is developing. And f5 is also making me nervous with the weakness of the king. Knight d2, good move. That wasn't it. Okay. So, right, what white is, or excuse me, what black is thinking is a tactical way of dealing with the issue. Now, admittedly, maybe we're already just worse here, so maybe I don't have great advice here. So the problem I see with this, though, is now the e pawn is going to be weak, and the d pawn is going to fall anyway. All right, I looked at this a little earlier in the day, and queen f5 was played. Now here's an interesting, this is an interesting position for more advanced players as well, in particular to think about what is the evaluation of this position. In general, I want to say this position is lost for black. Now, maybe it's not entirely true, but the reason I want to say in general is in these positions, the king safety, and let's call it either the heavy endgame or the heavy late middle game, whatever you want to, however you want to define it, right? It's really nasty for the black king. Okay, the next thing I want to say is notice that with the next couple moves, white blows it with time. And this is a good example of helping us think about what time is. So in the opening, it's clear what time is. Time is about getting your dudes in. You're a coach and you're sending your players into the game. It's a very simple thing to grasp. And once you do it, you can play GM moves in the opening. Time is always important, though. And one reason that lower-rated players get wasted by GMs in the endgame is they don't know what to do. So in this case, white must figure out a way to give their king some luft. They got to get some luft, bows. Right? And so whether it's h3 or g3 or the very frisky h4, one of those moves needs to get played. Right? As a default, I think h3 should be your move. Okay? And right, it feels at least close to winning this position. So watch what white does. Queen d2, queen c3, queen d2. We're not doing anything. Queen e5. Now I want to stress, queen e5 is a good move because it centralizes the black king. Now black is close to equality. Now the problem with h3 is now when he does this, he can mess with us a little bit. And now black even goes for it. Okay. Now, do I think black should go for it? Interesting question. I don't know. That's pretty frisky, boss. It's pretty frisky. Now, if I was black, I'm pretty sure I'd be happy with queen e5, and if I was white, I would not take the draw. I'd play. I can't play g3, though. Let's talk about that. It would be nice if I could play g3, but on g3, rook f2 comes, and then I'm hanging the poor rook. So already, by wasting time, black got back in the game. And f3, I don't know, boss. Really? Is this a thing? We're going to find out. It's going to be really dangerous. Why, though, can't we play king g3? I got to delete that variation because I want to put this later into our dojo collection. After king g3, it seems like our king is doing some good work, right? And if we own the d-file and there's no clear counterplay, we're on top. We're doing fine. Yeah. And SB McManus in the comments is saying he's just obsessed with f2. I get it. I get it. Okay, so f3. This is very frisky because now white's structure is getting a little bit mangled. But maybe it's okay. Let's check. Pop. That's the first question. e4. And we're going to say king h5 does not work because of queen d5, and g4 is going to come. So, king g7, check to the miserable king. Pop. Check to the miserable king. Check to the miserable king. King g8, high level of friskiness. High level of friskiness, my friends. Whew! All right, now what is the possible saving grace for black? That this queen c4 check does not exist. However, this is too much frisk for an old GM like myself. Check to the miserable king. Pop. Oh no. Pop, pop. All right, now let me just say I'm terrified. Terrified, Mr. Black. McManus was like, no draw for you, buddy. I'm going in. I'm going in. So, the first issue is that white should very much consider queen h8. Now, what is the evaluation on there? I don't know. It's hard for me to imagine that white's going to lose that thing because it's so hard for black to escape from all the checks, right? And then, of course, if we somehow lose the pawn on f3, then then maybe we could lose the game. Yeah, so that's already giving me heartburn. So Black, let me just say, he gets points for being courageous, though. I had a game at the Eastern State where I lost because I just wanted to play chess. I got there and I was like, I don't want to draw. I want to fight it out. So I understand. So here we go. Now, White could play GF, and then Black could force a draw, and maybe that's what White was thinking. Pop, pop, pop. Let's see what McManus says here. We get to a pawn endgame. Black has a majority on the queen side, but White has a passed pawn, so the situation is equal. Well, interesting analysis. In general, I would say that we would rather be Black. And this is a very tough endgame to analyze. Why would we be Black? Because you have what we call the outside passed pawn. The White's pawn is the pawn on e4. So, now, we're just at the beginning of the analysis, though, because this is about to get hot. Now, I think the first thing we should note is what SB says here. That on b5, king g2. He is inside the box. Let's make the box, right, over here. That's our box. Okay. An interesting, I would say the interesting attempt for Black here, I think, is g5. So, to imagine it, it would go g5, king, 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 and then I think White has to sit. f4, I'm going to go ahead and say is losing because later you're going to have to go fetch the c pawn and I'm going to win the e pawn. Is that still maybe a little tight? Might be a little tight, but definitely looks bad for White. No, it looks lost. So let's go through this with variations here. g5, I always want to prevent f4. King, 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 king. I think White has to sit. Let's say here, here. It looks bad. It looks bad because Black has more waiting moves. I will get the king to f4. Now, nota bene, when I get to my king to f4, I am not going to ever take this pawn because then Forrest is going to run. When I get there, though, I will have the option to push him away from d3 due to Zugzwang and then pop him with g4. Is it still hot? Yes, it's still hot. Do I know exactly what's going on? No. No, I don't. There might be another way, too. I can Zugzwang him and then force him to go to e3. Oh, this is hot. This is really hot. And then I have c4. So it's hot. It's a hot endgame. One which would take a good at least half hour for me to figure out. Let me say something about pawn endgames. First of all, this would be a great opportunity in the analysis of the game to really go into pawn endgames, trying to understand them. Could be good in a postmortem as well. The other thing about them is this is full system 2 thinking, okay? Yes, there's a little bit of intuition going on. For example, I know that I would like to try to prevent f4, but then there's a lot more, the most of any phase of the game, the most calculation goes into pawn endgames because you can go and go and go like you can't in other phases of the game. That's why they're so brutally hard and really teach you calculation more than any other phase of the game. Okay, let's see how this went. King f7. Good. Now for my money, I want White to play f4, so that if Black ever plays g5, we push past and say, "Bows, that's a passed pawn that you're never going to touch." Good. g5, please. Ooh. Oh. Oh no. So right, a5, critical mistake. Now, we're talking about the benefit of analyzing our own games here. This is it, because this is a kind of mistake where you can really definitely learn from, right? This will happen again. And the simple way to understand this is that white now will be able to stop black's 3 pawns with their 2 pawns with an a4. However, a4 immediately is a mistake. What white needs to play first is f4, king d6, and then a4. And then it's very believable that black is toast, because essentially white has an extra pawn, an extra pass pawn at that. What have I done now, huh? What have I done now? What have I done now? Okay. So let's see, a4, and you're absolutely right that on g5 here, maybe you have a chance to hold the thing. I'm not 100%, by the way, that you're holding it. And when you say the position is lost, definitely do some analysis. So, for example, g5, can't, like, for example, g5, f4, pop, king f3. Who's going to run whom out of tempos now? So then that's actually a bummer for white. h6, h4, h5, Zugzwang. So then after g5, if f4 isn't possible, then there's no way to win it, I don't think. Because king d3, like king f4, how is white going to win that one? We'll eventually get, it's still a little hot, right? I don't see it. Okay, that was great, you guys. Let's move over to, someone's pinging me, which means I've probably done something terrible again. So, okay. Kraai, get it together, buddy. Move it on over to the scoreboard, and let's go see Mr. McManus at work. Mr. McManus, I think, is going to be an example of somebody who's not on the full grind yet. So there they are, and this is before we want to go. Oh, this is after we want to go to before. SBC McManus. All right, buddy. All right. Oh gosh, I can't hide that sheet. Oh, right. 1,000 to 1,100, and then as we see here, 118 points, $7 per click. Beautiful. Some work done in a little bit of each of these areas. Yeah. Fantastic. And what that means to me is that if McManus continues to work, SB continues to work, this next cohort is definitely achievable. It'll take some work, but it's definitely achievable in a short-ish period of time. Let's say 6 months to a year. Okay, great. Let's move it then to the next person. This is Hogboon. And we're going to go look. Pop, Hogboon. Let's flip it from black's perspective. Now, here's a hilarious game. I looked at this earlier. So, F3, there's all kinds of funky things that I'm seeing at the lower rated levels against the Caro-Kann. an earlier show, we were looking at the hillbilly variation, which just made me want to die. The F3 move is also, of course, always made me want to die. But, there's at least some interesting play for white when black takes. This is a very interesting move. I hadn't seen that. This is definitely prep. And let's look why. So pop, pop, and all of a sudden the move bishop c5 is looming on the horizon. White doesn't appreciate how evil this move bishop c5 is. I'm not sure I did either when I first looked at this. I was like, queen b6? Interesting. So regardless of what white does, in the game knight c3 is played, natural move, ed bishop c5. We're threatening this poor dude. If he goes here, we're going to snip and we're going to land on f2. Okay, that's the problem. If he goes to knight e2, it's pop. So what's the key? One of the key problems? Baus, you blocked your knight on f3 by playing this silly opening, and now that's the only reason this queen b6 thing has a shot. Okay, so let's look. Knight c3, bishop c5, and now white had to play knight a4. I guess I'm going to, well, by the way, this is a variation that we needed to put up there. Hogboon gives bishop here, king e2, queen d4, and I'm not a fan of that because this allows white to go into the endgame. Now, I was assuming we would play something like check to the miserable king, c3, and then maybe takes, and then the white king is permanently on the run. Okay, queen e2. Thank you very much. I guess the game's over. And white completely collapsed here with rook g1. By the way, with queen e2, let's just say, even if you missed the fact that your knight was hanging on g1, you should say to yourself, oh no, Krai's going to yell at me if I block the bishop with queen e2. That would have saved you, Baus. That would have saved you. So it's all over now, Charlie Blue. He's just taking everything here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ooh, blocking the bishop. Of course we want to play knight c6, right? By the way, yeah, okay, that's fine. It's getting a little highfalutin. It's getting a little highfalutin. Now I'm getting a little concerned. Boom, good move. No need to be a hero. Thank you. Thank you, Hogboon. No need to be a hero, Baus. Check to the miserable king. That's not going to do it. Thank you very much. Bam! Very nice. Very nice. That's what they deserve. Okay. Now, one of the things I want to stress about this is it would have been helpful for us to see the times here. It would have been very helpful for both players to think about, like, clearly you laid a trap for him with queen b6. It would have been good to know that white's times here and here, for example. And then later, definitely you gave him more than you should have. However, you were up so much material that it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Okay, so here we go. Let's go take a look quickly at Hogboon before we go on to the famous hero of the dojo, Jack Stenglai. Hogboon. Right, you got to spell correctly or else it doesn't work. Okay, there is Hogboon. And let me check something. Oh, I almost blew it again. So there at the top, 41. 8 points per box. That generally means that Hogboon is flying. And some games submitted. Definitely loads of tactics. There it is. Look at that. Hogboon. Little tactics, a little game analysis, boom, on to the next level. So my prediction is, again, what I kind of said with SB is that at 7 points per box, you can next cohort you can do it. It's gonna get harder. 6 to 12 months could be a goal for you in terms of getting it done. Then we look at this next level. 1200, you are allowed to do an opening against E4, which is funny, of course, because you've obviously got an opening against E4, and you did some deep creative work to slime your opponent, right? Okay, but now it's officially allowed, and now we're going to start getting real with the mate in twos. We're going to get real with a book, Winning Chess Tactics, Endgames. It was already there, it just gets a little harder. Winning Chess Strategies, great, right? So all this stuff is going down now at the 1200 level. Okay, let's move to Jack's game here. And we'll look at Jack's progress on the scoreboard as well. So, lots of Caro games. F3. Uh-oh. Got it. Okay. I just want to make sure it was actually Jack doing the annotations here. So, knight F6. Fine. And one hilarious thing about this is we could get a transposition to the Steinitz or classical variation of the French with E5, knight D7, F4, and then E6, C5. But definitely knight C3 is in the spirit of this opening. Yeah, this is interesting. A3. Now, Jack, what am I going to say about A3, Bows? First, let's look at what he says. Preventing bishop E4, which is the main move in a different variation. Black now has to move the bishop to E7 due to the fork after bishop D6. Okay, so here's the thing. Bishop B4. It's really important to see that black really doesn't want to take the knight ever on C3, right? So A3, first of all, you should hear my voice. My great soothing voice that says, Bows, don't lose a tempo. Don't do it. So what are, I think a good default move here would be bishop E3. We could think about bishop G5. We could again play E5, right? All of this stuff, and E5 would be a straight transposition to that Steinitz position. So, and let's read what you write. I considered bishop E3 just to discourage C5, but it seemed passive. Bows, A3 is passive. You're not developing your stuff. And one thing we should say about it, let's look at it for a second, Jack. So bishop B4. Now consider, now we go E5, and the bishop is completely misplaced because no puedo ever take on C3 because that's their good bishop. Yeah, that's a fantastic French then. And furthermore, if we didn't want to do it, we could play bishop D3 and knight E2. And I think that's more in the spirit of this fantasy stuff. Is because the whole idea was like, why somebody was like, dude, I just want to, either they help me open the position by taking, or they just give me that nice center, right? Okay. All right, here we go. So A3, C5, frisky. Okay, let's read what Jack wrote. This move initially surprised me, but now I think it makes sense as black has a lot of trouble developing otherwise. Black doesn't want to develop the bishop yet because black is hoping for DC bishop C5. Right, let me say something really obvious. The reason this move is possible is because we blew a tempo on a3. After bishop e3, I don't think this is possible. It would at least be very controversial after bishop e3. Okay, so good move, c5. By the way, one of the things about the dojo and any kind of competitive chess environment is as you're getting better, things like a loss of tempo with a3, they're going to punish you more, right? So right away it's like, oh, yeah, I blew a tempo with a3, and now all of a sudden c5 is working, and it's a dynamic position for black. Bishop g5. Okay, here we go. Now it's going to get spicy. Let's read what Jack wrote. Here I was deciding between bishop g5, bishop e3, ultimately went with g5 because I wanted to play a bit more aggressively. I thought black might play h6, g5, which would be pretty weakening. Okay, this is going to get interesting. Now, I definitely feel black is doing great here. Black has a couple different moves. However, this is already a slightly unpleasant position for white that I'm trying to imagine, like it's already gotten unpleasant. And let's just say the obvious thing. We actually saw it in Hogboon's game with f3 is that we really have to worry about this diagonal, right? And our knight is now poor. So the deficiencies of the fantasy variation are coming through once we lose time with a3. Okay. I'm not sure I really don't have a great move here for white. So bishop g5, and black has a lot of moves. cd, knight c6, bishop e7. All of these things seem reasonable to me. Let's see what black plays. cd, okay. Queen d4, bishop e7, weird. Let's see what Jack says. This move really surprised me. I was expecting knight c6 in order to try to kick my queen. I think this may be a mistake as it allows my queen to continue hanging around in the center of the board. Knight c6. Okay, good. And now look at this variation Jack does. It's absolutely correct that e5 is always a question, but then it hinges on the evaluation of what do we think about h6. And this is the pattern that we get in the McCutcheon variation, which unfortunately is no longer playable. It was great while it lasted. Unfortunately, no longer playable because the computers have wrecked it. But this is the pattern we get with g5, bishop f2. And I'm definitely going to say black is clearly better in this position because the knight is dead. And after knight d7, we still have this problem, and we don't have the knight effectively coming into the game. Okay. So, how bad was bishop e7? Maybe not that bad, because we still have a fundamental problem as white, which is knight c6 is still going to be on black's mind. So what does Jack come up with? Castles. Oh, that's risky. That's frisky. Okay. All right. So Jack is dreaming of winning a pawn on d5. This at least gives black something to think about. Let's see what this ed5 variation. Right. So this doesn't work because of the trick that Jack points out. Great. These are great notes, Jack. This is great notes, dude. And correct. If castles, then black has time to play bishop e6, and eventually the tempo is coming back to him or her with knight c6, and this knight is poor. Right? Okay. So castles is a really frisky move. Let's see what black does. Castles. Okay, here we go. Pop. Oh, man. Here I considered some other options before taking the pawn. I didn't like how undeveloped my king side was, and I knew black would develop the bishop with tempo at the end of the line. But black's queen side is similarly undeveloped, so I ultimately decided this wasn't a big factor in the position and I could just take the free pawn. I also knew if I didn't take, then black was going to play knight c6 soon, and I would lose my opportunity to take. Okay, let me just say, Jack, this is a very fascinating position. And what's interesting to me about it, several things really, is that if you take, can you get the queens off the board? If you get the queens off the board, which I don't know if you can, but if you could get the queens off the board, then I'm like, right, then maybe we're even better. If the queens don't come off the board, then I think we're in trouble. But on the other hand, we might be in trouble anyway, because knight c6 is a hell of a drug, right? That's just a hell of a drug. There is another slightly interesting option here, and that would be to play e5 with, I'm going to get rid of this variation too because I want to add this to our model games database. Knight c6, ef, and the point is that here we have this winner. So there's no knight c6 here, and on here knight d7, then we can either take or do the fanciful h4, right? Saying that, well, if he ever takes there, then they're going to be in trouble. This is your alternative if you don't like ed. Now, let me stress why ed gives me the heebies. If the queens don't come off, then we have to say it's a bishops of opposite color position, and black has the jump on, or will seem to have the jump on the queen side. So what does that mean? Pawns are always important, and initiative is always important, but the value of initiative in relationship to pawns goes up when we have opposite sides castling, right? Which is what we have, right? You're the one that did it, Baus. You're the one that castled, right? Okay, so here we go. Let's check it out. Pop, 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 the boldness. Okay. Knight d5. I like your variation. Knight c6, knight e7. Pop, pop, pop. Okay, here we go. Black plays bishop e6. I'm not 100% on bishop e6. But let's give it a try. Queen e4. I'm not a huge fan. By the way, the other option is knight c6. But let's read what Jack says here. I had calculated up to this point when I played ed5, but hadn't decided where to put my queen. And on queen d6, Jack says, I considered queen d6 to try and encourage a queen trade. I discarded this as black can just play queen g5 to avoid the trade. And even if black does trade, I'm not sure the endgame is winning. Now, hold on, Baus. Yeah, whether you're winning or not is a different question. You're just trying to survive here. We want survival here, Jack. You're down in time, and this dude is coming for you here. Hold on. Hold on. Party's just starting here, Jack. Okay. So queen d6 is definitely the move, if I'm going to believe in the ed5 decision, right, is the move that we would want. And on queen g5, we have queen d2, right? Queen d6, the intention there is just to get in black's face. Black's face enough that it disturbs their development. Now, I think the critical variation might be queen d6, queen f6, and I'm going to say the party's probably going to continue. We got things like knight c6, rook d8 coming. We're not developed. My sense is black at least has full compensation. Okay? All right, so here we go. Queen e4. Does black develop? Oh, I think knight c6 is a mistake as it allows me to play bishop d3 with tempo. And you give knight d7. Okay, I at the very least I have sympathy with this. So knight d7, bishop d3. In the postmortem, my opponent told me that she considered playing knight d7 instead of knight c6 but discarded it because she didn't have time to get the knight to f8 to protect h7. However, knight f6 would have performed the same function while also kicking my queen out of the center. I think this would have been better for black than what was played in the game, as white no longer has a fast attack. Okay, that's great analysis, dude. Great analysis. Okay. So, let's say it this way. I'm less concerned with white having a fast attack and white just developing. If we can play bishop d3, knight e2 in a short period of time, then we're not going to die on the queen side, right? And on the other hand, knight d7, I don't know exactly what's happening, but I'd rather be black. Black's going to get to play rook c8. We're gonna start a party over there. We're gonna start a party. Okay, fascinating. So, knight c6, bishop d3, good move. And now black has a little bit of a choice to make. Bishop d3, by all means, has to be correct. And you write about f5. This also prevents mate, but looks kind of ridiculous, and the light square bishop is now very destabilized. Well, that's well said. So if I'm black, the reason I might consider f5, which would win a tempo, but as you say, destabilize the position, is because if I play g6 and knight e2 comes, and I have no answer to knight f4, we have zero juice against the white queen side, right? Let's look at how this goes, though. g6, knight e2. Okay. Now, rook a c8, which is what white played, is thematic, but I don't know really what it threatens yet, right? I don't know what it threatens yet. And you go for it then with h4, which is like the big cojones. That's the big cojones. I think it's not dumb for black to it's dumb. It's just crazy risky for her to consider queen g5. I don't actually know the gender you just referred to Echo as a her earlier. So queen g5 is definitely a thought. I believe in your position if they take the pawn. Okay, I do. But the queen would be annoying hanging around on f2 and yada yada. And notice that the claim of g6 is that black has killed your bishop on d3. In any case, knight e2, for sure, we got to play knight e2. Is that true, buddy? I mean, if you were afraid of queen g5, you could play h4. Actually, you write about this too. I considered the immediate h4, but decided it'd be better to wait until my knight was in the game and my rooks were connected. The very principled decision. And then I guess what's the variation after queen g5? You should definitely believe in white after black goes and takes that pawn. But there's reasons to be mildly hopeful that black... No, is there, buddy? Is there? I don't know. I might take it all back. Well, it depends. I guess maybe queen g5, then you could play f4. You could play f4, it's true. Okay, so let's just say knight e2 can't be wrong. Rook a, this hard moment for black. Maybe rook a d8 or f d8. All right, let's look. Spicy. Now, Jack, I feel maybe if you were more concerned about survival, then a prudent move would be knight f4 to get out of dodge. You know, to get out of dodge before we're toasty or before we're crispy critters. In the case of knight f4, actually, let's look what you write. Knight f4. I considered going after the bishop, but I thought this would likely lead to a queen trade. I was fine with the queen trade if black forced one, but otherwise I wanted to attack on the king side. Jack, you want a queen trade, boss? You want a queen trade? If bishop d7 happens, you just joyfully take that position. And if you wanted to be a true champion about it on bishop d7, you could even play knight d5. So if we can achieve this trade, Jack, for sure. Now, I do want to say there's a little bit of a heebie-jeebie for me on this, which would be, does black, can he mess with me? Can she mess with me with queen g5? For example, h4, queen h6. Let's just say no, I don't think so. g4's got to be a good move. I'm threatening this thing. I'm preventing bishop f5. I'm doing great. So wait, Kraai, get rid of that variation. These are great notes, by the way. This is really good. Definitely Jack. You have won the pawn, boss. You have won the pawn. If you can get the queen trade, take it. And your knight must be improved anyway. All right, so here we go. h4. Now black needs to do something creative here. And you write about h5. I'm not thrilled with h5 because then knight f4 makes even more sense. So, is there anything we can do here as black? The default move, I think, should be queen f6. For sure. Then you have to think about bishop f5, and at least, you know, we're doing some things. Queen is also nice to be, for her to be next to her man. The queen. We're not talking about black, we're talking about the queen here. To be next to her man on queen f6. I definitely believe in your position, but notice that black has so many more chances there than in the positions where you go into the endgame. When we go to the endgame, it doesn't matter that we have opposite sides castling anymore. In the endgame as well, your king is better situated. Not only is it closer to the center, but it can be a shepherd to your advancing pawns. And I want to stress, there's probably an interesting thing for you to realize is that, yes, I imagine, I can tell from your notes you're an attacking player. And you want to finish this game, but sometimes, especially if you're going to steal a pawn in the center, you're going to need to try to close it out. Okay, here we go. Rook f8, I agree, not the best. h5, amazing. I still want you to play knight f4. And then there it is again. I considered knight f4, but rejected it because I thought my attack would be strong, and again encouraged a queen trade. Okay, so queen c5 doesn't feel right. Again, the default move should be queen f6 to keep the queen close to her man. And now we're going to say this is a tactical situation for white. It just feels like this is the moment to calculate. Okay, first let's see if Jack played HG. Yes, okay. Now we're going to just see how they recapture. And queen g5 can't be it. Why is queen g5 a good move? Wait, f4, queen g6. Here I would have tried to win this endgame using my extra pawn. Jack, you got an extra pawn, boss. You got a pawn. It's a big one, too. It's a huge pawn. It's a huge pawn. Your king's better. Everybody's doing great. Now, maybe you have something even better in this position because this whole thing looks very suspect, such as queen f4, because then you'll something like this is going to have to happen. Something like that's going to happen, and you win the bishop, and then the bishop, that's a big piece. That's a big piece. You got the light squares, you took care of your bad knight. Okay. So, interesting. FG. Now, the really courageous thing for black would be HG, but I think on HG you're just dealing with queen G5, right? So HG from you seems correct and right. This is a big, as you mentioned earlier about the bishop on E6 being unstable, it's definitely true here. All right. Bam! Ooh. Take it easy, Jack. Take it easy, Bows. Take it easy, man. This was a good move, although I played it too quickly. Yeah. Great move, man. Great move. That's a good game. So, pop, boom. Now, again, one of the things I think what Jack is saying, this is very important. This applies to me as well. Anybody, really. You see a move like Rook H7, and you gotta really, really double check. And I think what Jack is implying is that he didn't consider Queen G5. Well, that's what he says. And definitely Queen G5 is a move you have to consider before playing Rook H7. That's how games can be lost. Check the miserable king, and now we're up. Let's check out Jack's technique. Oh, brutal. Brutal moves. Dang, take it easy. Yeah, great game. Great game. So, again, you guys, Jack is a hero of the dojo because he's really helping out with very key aspects of, let's say, the tech side of our whole operation. At some point, you will use the ChessDojo scheduler, an amazing piece of programming. So if you ever see Jack, you can thank him. And let's now check briefly at Jack's scoreboard here. And then I gotta step off. I gotta get something to drink. I'm dying here. All right, let's find Jack within the scoreboard. So there Jack is, and so we're going to look at what Jack did in this cohort. Began at 1683 and is now 1800. 17-point game, 3 points per box. Okay, so that is a grind. That is a grind. And I like it when I see the grind because it shows that progress is possible. Right? That's what it shows. There's a lot of work to get 3 points per box in here. Let's look at how Jack did it. So 18 games, 15 analyzed, some postmortems. Fantastic. All of the prescribed mate in twos. Fantastic. The mate in threes, all of them. Nice. Okay. All of the puzzle rush stuff. Fantastic. The book, done. Endgames, done. This is work, my friends. This is work. Some sparring positions. We've had some problems organizing sparring between people. Jack is one of the key people in helping us get that enabled so we get more of it. So it's easier for people to do. Amazing. Okay, Jack, I'm pumped. Not only am I pumped at what you've done for the dojo, but I'm just a fan of the work you're putting in here. And I'm going to say, it's clearly going to be a struggle for the next cohort, which is more competitive. And let's go look at what is awaiting Jack in this next business here. Obviously, we've got the games, more mate in twos, higher puzzle rush bars, chess tactics from scratch. I want to stress, especially the way, for anybody, but the way Jack wants to play with aggressive chess. By the way, Jack, I'm not saying that you shouldn't play aggressive. It's just in that particular position, it was time to go to the end game. Chess Tactics from Scratch, I think, is a really good book for Jack and this cohort to really go through and think about calculation, right? There's all kinds of books we have in the program that deal with calculation, but for this cohort, that book is fantastic. And obviously, we got some end games, winning quickly with white. I've had some misgivings about that book. But in any case, we're going to actually discuss that in our reboot about whether that's an example of whether that's something we can pick, stick with. And then we're getting rook endgame progression match. This is where the real work begins. That's also something that really is only going to work within the dojo if people start using Jack's scheduler. And that scheduler seems to get better and better all the time. But that's something where people need to get together and find a time. And this first match, I think, is, it's 8 to 10 positions. vary the most fundamental of all the rook endgame progression matches. If you can do that, you will play rook endgames better than any 2000. It takes some work. It is something that has to be retested. And the key thing to understand is you will not get it 100% right. The idea is that you play it better than someone in your cohort. And then when you go to the next cohort, if you graduate from that, then you will play more positions against a higher level of opposition, right? And here at the dojo, if they're doing the rook endgame progression match, by the way, a lot of people skipping leg day around here, if they're doing the rook endgame progression match, it means they've studied it already at least a little bit themselves. So you're already facing somebody who has some skill in the matter. Okay, my friends, that was a great graduates, and I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to raid somebody.